Hello and welcome to the DPC Show. My name is Dan Offen, aka Mr. Big Jams. In this show, I'm going to be taking you through all 6 of the DPC regions, aided by 6 of the world's top analysts who are going to help you stay on top of everything going on across the entire DPC. We're going to be kicking off pretty sharpishly, but before that, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Daniel Offen, and that's spelled Daniel, then O-F-F-E-N. And if you'd like to financially support me for creating this podcast, you can find links to my Patreon in the episode description. We're going to be kicking off straight away with Peksu, who is going to be taking us through the goings-on in Western Europe. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through a little bit, I guess, about what your top match or matches of the week were.
I think Secret OG and Liquid Tundra, probably my favorite series. I think Brame Alliance was the biggest upset of the week, but I wasn't like that. I didn't follow that series that closely, but yeah, Liquid Tundra and Secret OG were my favorite series of that week, and yeah, they were also yesterday, so I had the most mind from those series.
Yeah. Considering they're so recent in your memory, let's start with Secret OG. It was a big series. Secret going to a 2-0 loss against OG there. Talk me through what happened.
I think first game was Secret game to lose after the laning test they had. I think they had a really solid draft. I think they kind of outdrafted OG in the way that they had really solid lanes and made Ana's game really hard from the start. But I feel like Secret didn't play. I feel like the map the way that they maybe should have used after the lead that they had. I think they had like 2 or 3K lead at 10 minutes and something. They could have played it differently, and I think OG were like more, how to say, they were like punishing Secret for their like greediness on the map, and they were like catching these heroes one by one, and then Ana was slowly starting to get back in the game. Even though I feel like this game was, I think Seb did a lot, but I also think like Topson and Saxa, they were playing really well. Overall, OG, like that game was a really back and forth game, and I think that series, I think OG, they just played better, but I think that game for sure, I think it was something that Secret games to lose. I feel like after the start they had, but yeah, OG had a good laning, good lineup to team fight them later on, and then they punished Secret when their BKBs got lower and stuff like that. So also we saw some draw mid which was also interesting.
Exciting one. A lot of people who may have only kind of followed this game on social media would have seen that a lot of the chat was about Sax's performance, which I remember being as pretty phenomenal. Do you think he was the factor that won that game, or do you think it's more complicated than that?
I think Saxa played good. I definitely think he played really well, and it was a Clockwork. Obviously, Clockwork is not the easiest or like the best hero to shine on, and I think he did some good hook shots, and he was like setting up a lot of like kills. Dobson played well. Like I said, I think Seb played well. I think Notel and Anap, they played good as well. But I think you can like, I saw the most out of those 3 players in that series. I think definitely Saxa did stand out to me how he played on the Clockwork. And the second game, that was also a little bit like both of these games were kind of like they were like happening a lot of different things. Both of the teams were having their times when they were strong and they could have won the game, but OG kind of went with their comfort a little bit with this Alchemist on Seb, giving those Ags to his team. Lion also really strong in that game later on. Having a Dazzle, we haven't seen too much Dazzle yet, but I really feel like this hero is a strong one right now. How the game has developed a little bit, I think this hero has been getting buffed a little bit as well. His shard is really strong. The item build that Notel did was really good as well. Yeah, so I think very good series for OG. I would say this was a really important series for both of these teams. And now that OG won that, it's gonna make Secret's journey to the major, I think, pretty damn hard now. And OG, they're looking better. Towards there still, I don't think they're secured. Major, no, they're not. But
No, they won't be quite.
yeah, but they still have like this was just a really important series. Like overall, this season has been really close. I think there has been like really close game. There has been barely any like 2-0 series. There's been a lot of 2-1s. A lot of game threes. Yesterday was 2 games, but that would have easily went for a game 3 as well. I feel like those games were really close. So yeah, this season is just very exciting and like hard to say who's gonna come on top of it now. Alliance, Liquid, they're in the 4-1 standings at the moment, but they also have some tough opponents coming against them in the upcoming weeks as well. So yeah, overall, really just interesting
Yeah.
standings at the moment.
I mean, the highlight of that's the highlight of those standings, but the most interesting part that jumps out is, of course, Team Secret in joint 5th place. This loss
Yeah.
putting them there in genuinely serious threat of relegation from Division One. What do you think's gone wrong for Team Secret so far this season?
It's hard to say. I'm sure there's like a lot of multiple factors. I think other teams are learning more how Secret likes to play. Teams are like catching up how Secret, I think they were just so strong for a long time, to at least in the EU region. I think they were just like level ahead of any other team. But I feel like it's also when you are so good, other teams will look what you're doing the most because you wanna like see what are these guys doing so good. What can we learn from it? So I'm sure like a lot of these top teams are looking at Secret what they're doing. They're learning ways of like playing against them. They're learning ways to how they can adjust it in their own game. Um, and that's like something that I can say for sure. And I think Secret as well. When you're strong, it's hard to stay in the top. Like that's just how it is. I feel like at least like they're gonna be a top tier team for a long time, but it's gonna be hard to stay at that like the top 3 teams in the world or whatever for a long time because like I said, other teams will research you the most, so it will be harder to like every team will be preparing against you more and more. I think Secret has done already a really good job how they have been able to be so dominant for a long time. But yeah, now like I said, I think our teams are just catching up. I think the patch maybe is not feeling the best for Secret. Yes, I think some of the heroes that they like are not maybe the most played heroes right now and stuff like that. So I think there's multiple factors, but yeah, I think the biggest thing is still that I just think other teams are like catching up on their game, and Secret is maybe not really.
Stagnating a touch.
Yeah.
Let's move on then to the second series you mentioned, which is Tundra versus Team Liquid. Team Liquid are now sitting in a relatively healthy 2nd place. They took a 2-1 victory here. What was the highlight of that series for you?
I think the game 1 at least. I think Tundra had this Venom as a jungle idea again. I think that was the second time now we saw it in this EU region at least, and
The first
it
being
did
that
look.
puppy pick, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I think it hasn't worked out really well yet. I think they kind of sacrificed their axe in that game and hoped that the Venomancer would come on top of it. But thing is that they have done this Enigma jungle a little bit. Now they're doing this Venom. They're not scared to do their own thing on Tundra, which is kind of cool to see. But I feel like this Liquid, I think they have been doing like they're just drafting like these early lineups where they can like pressure early game. They do well in their lanes. They adapt from there. They take the towers, they take Roshan, and then they just make that fast pressure. And the games, at least the first game, the second game, they were really one-sided. The second game was Thunder won that game, but I feel like that was also like Liquid could have won that game as well. But like I said, I think Liquid they're looking really strong right now. Um, I think Sumail has been really playing well, and I think like Koikva is just a really good fit for that team because he can play. I think Blitz even said it on his tweet or something that he can just play anything, and it's like almost just easy to like he's put on an off lane where he has not maybe role, but he's still playing a lot of like different roles in any way in already in that team. So Liquid with like this new standing, they're looking really good, and I like Boxy, but I know Sumail is playing really well. So I mean, I don't think it's gonna. I don't know what's the case there anyway, but I don't know. Sumail
It's a
is
hard decision.
showing. Yeah. Sumail is showing up right now in this team at least, and I'm sure Liquid are feeling really good about themselves. And so far, for one now, they started off the season to lose to the Alliance, and then they have won every series after that. So yeah, they're looking good right now, and I don't really see. Um, Many ways of like they're still against Secret and then they're gonna play against OG, so there's gonna be some good teams. But I do favor Liquid in coming onto both of those series at the like So it's looking good for Liquid at the moment for the rest of the
certainly.
DPC.
Let's close up by the other series you mentioned there, which was the Brame Alliance series. I think Brame came into this tournament very much being seen as underdogs. They're not; none of them are really big name players. A lot of them are people who've been in the tier 2 scene for a long time, and taking 2-1 against Alliance is a pretty big result for them.
Yep.
Talk me through what ended up happening there.
I think Brame maybe abuse a little bit of Alliances, how they have been drafting as well. They like this Faceless Void, they like this Dragon Knight a lot, they play the Timber Soul. They have these certain heroes that Alliance have been picking throughout this DPC, and I think Brame had an idea how to go against that. I think the Shadow Demon pick, at least from Stomanen, or how to pronounce its name, the Processing 4 player in Brame, I think is one of his most I would say it's like one of his more comfortable heroes. At least I know the guy, and it was a really good Shadow Demon pick, especially against the Dragon Knight and the Spectre. So I think they had these very cool ideas how they draft. They had some ET position 3, which kind of destroyed the lane, and like it's also something that Skylark has been showing up on before. So yeah, I think Brame, I think they kind of were really prepared for Alliance, how they like to draft, and they were ready for it. They drafted some unique ways of like as well, like Spartan playing Dark Willow 5, doing really good on that hero as well. Haven't seen many people do that. So I think Brame kind of got Alliance off guard. I already said that I think Brame is a solid team. I think they have shown in this series they have played 2-1 against Liquid, 2-1 against Nigma. They won Thunder 2-0. So there's a lot of this series they have been doing really well, and now they just won the game 3 this time. So yeah, I think Brame, I think they definitely overperformed how I felt, but I think it is somewhat expected that this team can take games from good teams as well. And I think against Alliance it showed that they were really prepared for the series, and they drafted well and played well. So yeah, that's how it was.
Let's talking about what's coming up for every team, but Team Brame kind of at first. So Team Brame next week have Smashers, and then in the final week have Team Secret, I believe. Those 2 games as a run-up, do you think there's a chance they can make the major, or is it going to be a bit of... Because you'd expect them perhaps to easily be able to beat Smashers. Do you think they can beat Secret? Is it a possible major qualification for them?
I think they're still like have a chance for sure. I think Secret and Smashers are not looking so good right now. I think Secret, they still will have time when they play against Brame, so they might like still like get their stuff together. But I think Smashers for sure, they're 0-5 in this tournament so far. They haven't really looked that great, and I wouldn't say that they can't win Brame, but I think Brame has been looking way better. So I think if Brame gets their like comfortable heroes and how they have been drafting so far, I think they should be able to take down Smashers. And yeah, Smashers pretty much are relegated. I think 0-5. I don't really see them really bouncing back from that. I don't think they can even technically
I think it's going to
come
be a
back.
struggle, yeah.
Yeah. It's maybe even like tiebreakers, but it's not looking that good. They still have game against Alliance as well. So yeah, but yeah, I think Brame, they have a good shot at they have at least like a shot that they can do. I think the hardest teams they have played against, they have already played against them. So now the teams that they kind of have a good possibility of winning are still ahead. So if they play well and they do their thing, I think they can still fight for that major slot for sure.
Let's go into the rest of the games from next week, which is on May 11th is Tundra versus Alliance, May 12th is Secret versus Liquid, and the 15th is Alliance versus Smashers, as you mentioned. And then closing off with OG Nigma. I think OG Nigma's an obvious highlight there, but are there any other highlights for next week that people should check out?
I think Secret Liquid and Tundra Alliance, I think they should all be kind of interesting series. I think only the Alliance Masters, to me at least, is not that interesting in paper, but I think all the other series in that week are there's gonna be some heavy stakes on the line. I think Tundra, they are playing pretty well. I think they have this unique way of drafting. They played these jungle heroes a little bit, like on Snaking, the Enigma, the Venomancer. Alliance as well, they lost their first series, so they're gonna bounce back now. There's also some like this old teammates rivalry a little bit in that series as well. Secret Liquid, to me, that series is gonna be really interesting to see, because I think Secret now they have to win. I think if they don't win this series, I think they're for sure not gonna go to the major, and I think it's gonna look really grim for them, even like maybe relegating. So that series is gonna be really important for Secret. as well for Liquid. I think if they win that series, I think they're pretty much secured major. So that series, to me at least, is really really cool. But yeah, like I think I would say OG Enigma as well. OG Enigma, I think that series is something to look for. These teams have a big history between them. They have played against each other so many times, almost the same rosters. OG has one player changed from their old roster, and Enigma also has like they don't have Weeha now, but they have RDW. So there's like a lot of these teams. They just know each other really well. So that series is also gonna. Both of these teams are sitting at 3-2 at the moment. So winner of that series is gonna start looking good for the major. Loser of that series, it's gonna go close again. So yeah, a lot of stakes on the line, and it's just really cool to watch this DPC right now because you kind of can't really predict any team who's gonna win at the moment because these series are just so close. But it's also what makes it really interesting to watch. So
yeah, it's such a close. I think it's probably the closest region at this point. So
yeah,
definitely tune in for as much of Western Europe as you possibly can. But thanks so much for joining me, Peksu, and I'll see you next week.
See ya.
Huge thanks to Peksu for taking us through Western Europe. Peksu can of course be found on Twitter at PeksuDota. He's a wonderful analyst and a great player, and I wish him the best of success in whatever he eventually decides to follow, because it's been great working with him. We, however, are going to be moving on straight away to Eastern Europe, where Mo Farah is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so I guess to start, talk me through, I suppose, what you see as the top matches in this week's Eastern European DPC.
The top matches? Oh, it's a good one. I thought it was interesting watching Gambit versus PuckChamp. Obviously, PuckChamp not doing that well at the moment. They're now 1-4 at the end of this week, looking, really, really rough. But yeah, Immersion played really good Mirana in game 1 for Gambit. Kind of came around their mid-game timing, punishing PuckChamp's greed a bit because they had this Storm Spectre core. And then in game 2, this Doom mid just never disappears in CIS, does it? It happened in the Na'Vi series as well. I was like, oh my god, Iceberg's playing Mirana mid in game 1. And then in game 2 he picked Doom, and I was like, oh, okay, never mind. Back to normal then. But yeah, I mean, Gambit obviously had been having a really rough time before this week. And it looking like they weren't really going to be in contention for the major after going 0-3, I think they did. Because they lost to VP Spirit and then Na'Vi as their first 3 games. They came back, they beat Windstrike last week, and they beat PuckChamp this week, still 2-3. But the 2 teams that are going to the major straight away look so clear after this week already.
Yeah. So to go into that is Virtus Pro and Team Spirit, who are both on 5-0, 10-1, both of them. Talk me through their week. What did Team Spirit end up doing? Are they showing that they are far ahead of any other team?
I mean, the only team that they might not be far ahead of is obviously each other,
yes,
VP
course,
and Team Spirit. Team Spirit played against Unique this week, and game 1 was a little bit interesting. They had this they've been picking this a different kind of opening to normal. They did this AA Tiny, which is quite cool. So obviously you can flex the Tiny between mid and support. You can have this AA5, which is really strong against a lot of the heroes in the game at the moment. It kind of takes a lot of heroes out of the pool. And they did this. They had this troll that was laning against an axe, and the troll AA. Obviously, when you play this AA5, you kind of want these heroes like Wraith King, obviously, or Sven, like that. You have the setup to play with the cold feet and things as well. And they were laning against an axe, so it looked really great. And then Unique did this thing where they moved the position 4 Elder Titan to the safe lane, and they played the position 5 Oracle in the off lane. So obviously, every time they tried to cold feet, you could just proc it off with the Fortune's End, I think. Yeah. So they didn't have as much kill threat, but they just smashed the lane anyway. I mean, this AA just, it feels like it does so much damage in the laning stage if you're just able to trade efficiently, right, with the chilling touch and things. And then the mid tiny went out of control. It was really well played. And then in game 2, I don't know, it felt like when I watch Team Spirit, it feels like they always have good team fight, right, in their lineup. So they like picking these tides and things. Collapse has been known for playing Mars and things as well. They've played Toronto Tokyo plays a lot of puck, and I feel like. Do you remember we talked about VP last season? That no matter how badly or well their lanes went, when it came to team fighting and things, it felt like they were always doing the right thing the right way almost. The fights would just always go their way, and I see that in team spirit a little bit. I mean, game 2 wasn't game 1 wasn't that close at all between Unique. I mean, they eventually just got there, right? Game 2 was, it looked a little bit closer for a while, but eventually, I mean, this Axe performance was just crazy from Collapse. I enjoy watching Team Spirit. They're my favorite CIS team. So when they started really poorly last season, I was a bit worried, but they've carried off that form from season 1 straight into this season again. Like only dropping one game, I think it was to Windstrike. I can't remember who it was. But I mean, they look nailed on now, which is fantastic. It's nice to see a different CIS team have a chance to play out the major.
Yeah, certainly.
We'll talk about VP quickly though as well. Is that all right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. No, it's not all right.
No, that's okay.
Pro,
Let's talk about a different region. In game 1, there was this big hype coming into the series that GPK hadn't died in 5 games in a row, and the current record was 6, right? And so in game 1, he doesn't die, so he's matched the record. And then in game 2, VP picked this draft, and you look at it, and you're like, "There's no way he's beating this record." I literally no way. And he died at like minute 12 or something. So it kind of like. Everyone is like, oh, okay, never mind, right?
Yeah, if you don't want him to die, you don't become tiny. Like the mid-hero that always dies tons.
And the thing is with tiny as well, like you say, you have to initiate and go in, right? But some tiny games, like if you're able to just freely roam around the map and you get really ahead, then it's fine. But it's not really like that often anymore. So in game 1, it was absolute stomp. I mean, Extremum obviously were 0-4 before this series. They had a really rough week. And they were 0-5 at the end of this. So they're almost nailed on to go down now. VP, Extremum had this Deucer, and I think VP played the map so fast that Extremum, this Deucer didn't have a safe camp to farm by about minute 10. It was unbelievable. I've never seen a team take over the map so quickly before, in recent games and stuff. It must have been horrendous to play against. I watch these games and I'm like, oh my god, if I was on this Extremum team, it must be so frustrating to play against because you just have no room to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
you have to take such high risks to try and make plays and try and find farm, whatever. Game 2, VP, their draft was a little bit iffy. I think their lanes were a little bit weaker. They come out the laning stage a little bit behind. They had some mid-game fights that they kind of messed up a little bit. They didn't get as much from it as they would have, but they had this massive team fight composition anyway, right? And I mean, you watched the game. I had to miss a start because I was cooking. I know you watched you watched the whole game.
Yeah.
But it looked to me as if there was this one big fight around the Roche pit that went towards VP's way, and then with their big team fight, they seemed to have come back into the game almost. Is that right?
Yeah, effectively. I think the Void got a lot of really good chronos and became very difficult to kill. And ultimately, it just didn't really feel like any of the Extreme heroes could do anything to Void and the team fight of the Magnus as well. It felt it was a rough game for them, I think, after that point. It just became a snowball. They probably could have pulled it back, but maybe they just lack the skill.
I think, yeah. Well, that's, again, like we said about VP, it doesn't matter how their lanes go. If these guys have good team fight spells and they are very good at team fighting, you always have to back them.
It was a good choice of a buyback as well in that team fight because they bought back about 5 different players, which is a difficult. That's a really interesting team dynamic, I think, because there are some teams that are a little bit more fractured. They kind of buy back more haphazardly or at wrong times. But that was a really good big gold investment, and it swung the game for them.
Yeah, BSJ was saying on the panel afterwards about how I don't know if you saw what he was saying about how often they use buybacks more here than in NA and stuff, which is really interesting. And I think teams in Europe in general are pretty good at, and CIS actually understanding that, this objective is going to cost us the game if we lose it, right? Like a Roche, for example. So if we lose this fight, the game's over anyway. So let's just go all in, right, and just contest this Roche. It is what it is. If we lose it, fine, whatever. At least we'll know we've given it a go, right? But yeah, they like you said, they all buy back. They come into the game, they win the Roche, and they win off the back of it. They're not afraid to be throwing their lives on the line and buying back into the game because they understand how important it is. Mm-hmm. The other series I want to mention quickly is obviously Na'Vi playing against Windstrike, which was a few days ago now, a couple of days ago, I think. Na'Vi, there's this hero going around at the moment, which historically is one of my most hated heroes to play against ever. And it's not as bad at the moment as it used to be, and it's Enchantress. Do you remember when you used to have to play against Enchantress 3 and you would have the Untouchable at level 1 and she would just click you over and over again? It's not quite like that anymore, but this hero, I've seen Tiger's been playing it a lot for Liquid as well.
Yeah.
you just get this really early medallion, you take over a creep, and you just run at people with impetus and your medallion creeping, and you can just dive towers like non-stop. And we've talked in a past episode about how important position 3 is this patch, and how there's some 3s that just take over games and things, like these centaurs, these axes, Slardar, as well as another really good one at the moment. And this Ench just enables this offlaner to have a really good time, right? And all of a sudden, you're just diving tower at like minute 5. Your centaur has like a vanguard or something, and he's just medallioned up, and you're like, what do I do? It's like horrendous. And Ramsey's playing axe both games as well, so they had this axe enchantress lane both times, and it just crushes.
Yeah.
I mean, Ramsey's had a really good series, and it was funny because last season Roger played a lot of this Chen, right? And then in this season he's like, guys, I'm going to play Ench. I love these creeps so much. Don't take them away from me. All right. Yeah, another great win from Na'Vi. The group looks really weird at the moment. It's like very top heavy with Team Spirit and VP, and then there's just like 4 teams that are all like 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. So obviously Na'Vi are going to be favourites going into these last 2 games because they have to play Unique and PuckChamp, who are, PuckChamp we've already said are 1 and 4, Unique 2 and 3. Unique didn't look that great today against VP. Sorry, against Spirit. So I think if you had to choose a top 3 now, it'd be Spirit and VP. Whoever wins their series is probably going to come top.
But then AS Monaco Gambit have Extremian and Unique, but I suppose they're in the situation of having to win both of those games, whereas Na'Vi just have to not. Well, they have to win both of them to.
That's the thing. Na'Vi have their fate in their own hands, don't they? Whereas Monaco Gambit have to hope that Na'Vi slip up and still win their own games, which it never feels like a good scenario. If you can't control your own fate, then it's kind of like, we'll do as well as we can, but it is what it is. In the end, if Na'Vi just win their series, then there's nothing we can do anyway. And Monaco Gambit will look back and they lost 2-1 to VP, they lost 2-0 to Spirit, they lost 2-0 to Na'Vi. And if you're not beating, like we've said, if you're not beating any of the other top 4 teams around you, then you're really going to struggle to get to the major anyway, even if you beat the other 4 teams in your division.
It's going to be an interesting thing to see what happens to AS Monaco Gambit, because obviously that's a team with a lot of investment behind it. They've got the weight of Monaco, the giants of Monaco, behind them, and this team plays with like Seneko and no one. It would be a disappointment to not qualify for the major, I think, and we could expect to see a couple of shake-ups in that department.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, they got so close last time as well, losing in that best of 1 against, I think it was Liquid, right? In the tiebreaker to see if they would make the group stage from the wildcards. And it was really funny. I think I talked about this before. I can't remember. There was a clip out before like their game against Na'Vi in like the 3rd game of the series of the tournament of the group stage. And Snake was talking about how lovely the boot camp was and everything. And there's all this nature around them and stuff. And it just... And they go 0-3, and you're like, I wonder if you still think the same, because this is rough.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Let's go on to what's happening next week. We've got on May the 13th, VP versus Team Spirit, which is straight away, I imagine, the highlight of next week's CIS DPC.
I've got a bit of a peeve with this, though.
Okay.
If that's a official word or not.
It's a word, yeah.
A pet peeve, yeah. Do you remember last season when they were organising the scheduling? The whole point of leaving these last 2 weeks free is to make sure that the most exciting games are at the end. Right? Because remember last season we had VP versus Na'Vi. I think it was right at the end.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, this is so exciting. They've organised it so that at the start of week 5, the top 2 teams are playing against each other. And I looked at it and I was like, oh. And if you look at the scheduling, the last series of the whole group stage is Na'Vi versus PuckChamp, and I was like, why? why have you done it like that? So it is what it is, whatever. But yeah, the big one is obviously VP versus Team Spirit. I think PuckChamp versus Windstrike is going to be a huge series as well.
Extremian versus AS Monaco Gambit there on 14th, and 16th Unique versus Na'Vi and VP versus Windstrike. So there are some bigger games there, and I think there's a lot of games that are must wins too for the teams involved.
I mean, the PuckChamp versus Windstrike one is massive, because if PuckChamp win that, both teams will be 2 and 4, and then going into the last the other series, Windstrike still have to play VP and PuckChamp have to play Na'Vi. So if PuckChamp win that, they should be able to get into a playoff to see who goes down and who stays up. So all in their own hands, really.
Good to hear. I want to briefly go into the lower division and our standard Dendy watch. He's doing all right now. He's won 2 games in the last 2 weeks. Obviously, we didn't have an episode last week, but he won a game there, and then now they're sitting mid of the table in fourth position. Have you managed to watch any of the B8 games? What they're doing slightly better?
Not the B8 games, unfortunately. I saw that they beat Empire this week, which is fantastic for them, and I'm sure that would have been a really close series because Empire aren't a bad team at all. They were 3-1 before that, so massive win for Bay. I will say, coming up though, Bay still have to play Fantastic Five, and I think they have to play Trident as well, and both those teams are very winnable. Obviously, the big standout from this lower division though is how good Hellraisers are. They have looked fantastic. They were 8-0. They dropped one game against Namiga this week, who was second in the group stage. That series was absolutely wild. Game 3 went like 73 minutes, I think it was, and I remember watching and being like, "This is amazing! Like, this game's crazy." And the fact that it was Game 3 made it so much more exciting as well. So obviously, Hellraisers now still 5-0. They look, nailed on to get promoted, and they're also playing in the Pinnacle Cup as well, which is another tournament that's going on between like EU CIS teams. And they haven't lost a series there yet either. They're 2-0, so I mean, they're on fire. And hopefully, if they get put into the upper division, it'll be really interesting to see how they do. Whenever, I mean, I don't even know how that format's going to be, but I don't think anybody knows.
Fair enough. Well, lots to look forward to in the upcoming weeks for CIS. So thanks so much for joining me this week, and I'll see you next week. Huge thanks to Mo Farah for taking us through Eastern Europe. Mo Farah can of course be found on Twitter at MoFarahDota. The at Mo Farah will take you to famous British long distance runner Mo Farah, who he is not. But anyway, he's been great to work with, so thanks for him for this week as well. We're however going to be moving on straight away to Southeast Asia, where Danog is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, I guess talk me through what you see as the biggest and most important matches of this week in the DPC.
Well, there were a few series that were pretty important. I mean, TNC versus Boom came off. Execration in T1 is the one I want to start talking off the most about, though. It went to 3 games, and for me, if Execration won that series, they're going to the major. It wasn't decided whether it would be in 2nd or 3rd place for mine, but that would have left them at 4-2. Having beaten Neon, Fnatic, Omega, and I want to say Boom potentially before that. No, Boom beat them. But anyway, they would have only had Little Gun left to play, which is basically, I don't want to say a guaranteed win at this point, but they're clearly the easy beats of the group so far. So most likely 5-2 ending up. But no, T1 were able to take that series 2-1. And it's a little unfortunate, right? Because Execration, they tried to go this position 5 Treant Protector, didn't work out for them. Maybe trying to be a bit of a copycat with some of these other teams that have been playing it a little bit. Neon played it as a position 3, for example. They tried it as a 5. Didn't work out as well for them.
So is it just that Treant Protector? Were there other key moments of it who played particularly well for T1 to carry them to that win?
Carl actually stepped up his game a fair amount. So normally with this T1 roster, they're putting a lot of emphasis onto enabling 23 Savage, but in this series in particular, he really picked up his game, Carl. He was playing the puck most notably, and he had a fantastic game, just creating a ton of space to enable the Savage hard carry to come online. But for mine, it's like the Treant Protector isn't necessarily bad, and the way that the RR likes to play it is he goes 1 point in the first 2 abilities and then maxes out the living armor. Which is fine for heroes that want to be fighting constantly, or you just get this ultimate and then you just full in commit, like a Death Prophet, for example, with Exorcism, and then you guaranteed take an objective because there's nothing the enemy team can do about it with all this armor, all this regen. But no, they just picked it with heroes like a Leshrac, and even though Lesh is kind of good for that kind of same game style, they just never took objectives as a result of it. They kind of went for pickoffs a little bit more instead of towers. And so they were able to get enough space on T1 to be able to pull that one out. And victory went to them.
Talk to me a little bit about the performance of 23 Savage, because I remember, or maybe I'm misremembering, but in the early episodes you said that he was having not necessarily the impact we might have expected. Has he begun to pick up a little bit?
He has. And, I say it wasn't necessarily like the 23 Savage game, but he's still obviously playing these heroes at a very high skill levels. So, he played a Terrorblade and he didn't die. He played a Faceless Void and was getting all these fantastic chronos off. It's just that all of the weight isn't on his shoulders, whereas I feel like, in previous series, that's kind of been the case. It's just been like, let's just make sure 23 Savage has a good game. Are you doing all right, son? Okay, well, let's leave you there and hopefully you can do something good. But no, it was Carl. He got 26 kill involvements in a 30 kill game on his puck, playing fantastic Dota. Cuckoo as well. I feel like he's very much he's like the old 11 of Southeast Asia, where old 11's thing in China is that he's either like amazing or trash, in that he can feed away way too many kills, and Cuckoo kind of feels a similar sort of way. But no, he came through in this series, and it was very important for T1 as well, because now they're 3-2, I want to say, and the two series that they've got left are against Neon and Fnatic. So for their major and TI aspirations, it was imperative that they won that series, and well, lucky for them, they did.
You mentioned Neon there. I want to go into what's been up with them. They've had they won this week, but last week, which we didn't get to talk about, they didn't win, which puts them somewhat further down the roster of teams that we would have expected. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on there. Is this week a return to form? Do you think they can go on to beat Fnatic and T1 and rise up the ranks?
I think they can. I've still got them kind of penciled in as my second or third. It just depends how tiebreakers and all that fall. TNC are my clear number one. But for last week, I feel like that was around the time that the big Beastmaster nerf patch dropped and the big IO patch dropped. But Neon kind of still played it in the same roles, and it just didn't work out anywhere near as well for them, right? Because it's so much extra damage that you're lacking both in team fights for the Beastmaster, but for the IO, it's just that farming potential, and the extra couple of minutes that adds onto your item timings really does snowball in a big way. That can be the next item completed for the enemy's carry, which can be enough to turn things around for them. So I felt like they were stuck in the previous meta a little bit. So that was unfortunate. That was a big win for Execration to be able to take out against the team that came in 6th or 5th, 6th at the major. But Neon in their style, the game that they won in that series was playing a Trio Protector in the position 3 role. So they're still trying to innovate, and exactly. It just didn't work out for them this time. I think I saw back when Knoxville did based off the results of the major, how likely are the teams to qualify? And I think Neon was at like 75%, just purely based off the points that they currently had. So, I mean, I want to see them at the major, but even if they don't make it, I think they should be feeling somewhat secure. But, better to be safe than sorry, I suppose. And I always just want to see more of them. So hopefully they get at least third.
Great. Okay. You mentioned T1 there as your number one team. Let's talk through what they ended up doing this week. Because last week they lost to a TNC. You mentioned as your number one team. Last week they lost to T1. This week they managed to beat Boom 2-1. What's going right for them at the moment?
I think it was honestly just Gabby popping off. To be perfectly honest, the thing that TNC have added back into their arsenal is the fact that Armel, previously he was just playing the space creating mid players, the mid laners, like the Puck, the Storm Spirit, the Ember Spirit, the Void Spirit. But now they're actually giving him these roles like the Medusa, for example, and letting Gabby play a position 1 tiny, get a lot of the early farm, not necessarily the same levels, but use that to be able to roam around and, when he played that tiny, he didn't die. He was in, I think, like 22 out of the 24 kills that were in that game. So something crazy like that, and didn't die. So he's really putting in the hard yards, Gabby, to not just be this one-trick wonder. And it's the sort of thing that's in his DNA, right? Because he started off as that mid player. I mean, like Gabby Puck. I remember there's this clip with, I think, OD Pixel just commentating over him where he's just styling on everyone. And that's the sort of thing that he can be very flashy about. So I think we can expect to see a bit more of that, and I'm happy to see that they're getting this versatility ingrained into them still during this league, because I feel like when they do get to the major, I don't think it's guaranteed for them just yet. I think they've still got Fnatic and one other team to play, and Lil Gun, so they should be at worst 5-2. They're going to be able to square up against these international teams pretty well.
Great. Okay, let's close up then by talking about the week for Fnatic, who beat Little Gun 2-0 and then Omega 2-1. Omega, I want a brief word on them because they started very well with 2 wins in the first week and then have only lost going forwards. Is Fnatic beating them just a sign of them being a weaker team, or is that an impressive victory?
It's hard to say, right? Because Omega were able to take out that first game. I think that was kind of on the back of you're playing as this broodmother and it's just way too much to be able to deal with. But later on, I mean, for example, in one of the games that Fnatic played, they had an Enchantress, Beastmaster, Tusk, Luna, and TA, and they just went full on Death Ball, and they didn't have the heroes to be able to contest against that. They still did a really good job. They dragged it out for 40 minutes, so their execution in that game was really good. But I feel like Fnatic just drafted something that they didn't have any answers to, and it was just death by a million cuts, unfortunately. So Omega, they're pretty, I don't want to say hot favorites to drop down, but they're not looking in a fantastic spot. They have to win this series against Boom to give themselves any shot, because I feel like Neon, the only other team that's still on just the 2 wins, still have plenty of series to play. They've got 3 series to play. So, and you would say that they're going to beat Little Gun at the very worst. So, unfortunate that the 2 teams that came up from the lower division last season are the ones most likely to drop down again. But, you know, it does, I suppose, put egos in check a little bit if they were feeling a little bit, you know, happy about themselves, a little too happy. You know, you can be happy, just not arrogant.
Great. Okay, so let's go into what we've got coming up next week then. We've got a bumper week for SEA with OB Neon versus Little Gun on the 12th, Fnatic versus T1 as well. 13th, we've got OB Neon versus Fnatic, and then Little Gun versus TNC on the 15th, and Omega versus Boom. Would that 13th game, OB Neon versus Fnatic, be your pick of the week, or is there something else you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, and Fnatic versus T1 as well. I feel like, you know, it depends which T1 shows up, to be perfectly honest. You know, if the non-feeding Cuckoo shows up, and if the Carl that's able to grab the game by the scruff of the neck shows up, then I think they've got a pretty good shot. You know, Fnatic, they're 3-1 at the moment, but nothing about their gameplay has wowed me, you know? Like, TNC, I think, have those wow moments when Gabby can really shine. Armel does the same sort of stuff. Tim's, he really pops off, certainly. And Boomy as well from that position 5 role, even though he's more traditionally a 4, I think he's doing really well. And same sort of thing with Neon, right? Like we saw at the major, they can take it to absolutely everyone. They nearly beat Secret, for God's sake. Yeah. So it's those sort of things that I'm still waiting to see from Fnatic. They're just like a solid like 8 out of 10. But to be able to beat the best of the best, you need to be better than an 8.
Mm-hmm. Who in particular do you need to step up to get to that 10 out of 10?
Honestly, Jabs. I feel like he's a fantastic player, but the difference between his best and his worst is still a little too much for mine. And a lot of the times with these drafts, not so much now, because you know the likes of an Enigma isn't really as much in the meta right now with a Necro book and you know all the changes to the conversions cooldown, for example. But they oftentimes like draft quite heavily to enable him to be really successful at roaming. And if that just doesn't happen, then you know, you're in deep strife.
Great. Okay, we'll look forward to that then. I want to we've got a touch of time to touch briefly on the lower division there. What's been happening there? Any exciting developments?
Well, I'm not sure if people are aware of it, but Mid One's essentially gone and kicked Mushi from SMG. So they're playing with Rogi now instead, who he was playing on, I believe, Team Serenity for quite a while. And I didn't know this, but apparently he has like Australian dual citizenship, or at least permanent residency. So good on you, Rogi. But 2 SMG games this week. Motivate Trust, they're still looking really strong. They haven't dropped a single series. Only dropped 1 game against Army Geniuses. I just got finished casting 496 versus Army Geniuses. 496 taking that one out. So that means that you know this game between Mystery and Signal, very important for Mystery. They absolutely need to win it, because if they don't, they're going to be dropping out of the lower division. They're not going to beat Motivate Trust. They're just way too strong, the MTG boys. And there's some exciting series coming up. SMG versus Southbuild Esports, that's probably my game of the week to tune in for. And myself and Aries are going to be casting it, so make sure you tune in to my Twitch channel, because PGL does not have a channel for the lower division.
Yes, it's all resting on your shoulders.
Exactly.
So lots to watch there. Okay, exciting stuff coming up then for both divisions in Southeast Asia. And thank you so much for joining me this week. And I'll speak to you next week. Huge thanks to Danog for taking us through Southeast Asia. He's great to work with. He can be found on Twitter at Danog. He's covering the low division in Southeast Asia, all on his own channel, because PGL aren't streaming it themselves. So please head to his Twitter to find information there about what's going on in the lower division of Southeast Asia. It's actually a pretty good low division, so worth checking out. We, however, are going to be moving on straight away to China, where Kips is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, I guess talk me through where we are in China at the moment, coming into the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so China is a delightful chaos. At the start of, I think it was today before Elephant and IG played, we had a whole bunch of just 2-2 scores in the middle, with most of the teams in the middle of the pack all being on an equal score. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that China has front-loaded a couple of the easier matches for Elephant specifically, which is where their score is a little bit inflated in my opinion right now. They still have to play Aster as well as PSG LGD, which are also at the top of the rankings. And for the rest of them, yeah, the way I see the scores, we are probably going to end up with tiebreakers. Hopefully not for first place. I think Aster can take the remaining games and finish flawless at the top of the group. But the rest of them are going to be a bunch of 3-4s and 4-3s.
Yeah, so certainly. Let's go into that Elephant positioning first, because you mentioned that they've still got a couple of big games to come, but this week they beat IG 2-0, who for many people who maybe haven't been watching this season are the best Chinese team, having won the major. What ended up happening there, and what do you think about Elephant generally?
Yeah, so people who have been listening to the show know that I have been on the IG detractors team. I've always said, well, they're kind of overperforming, their economy is good, their fights are bad. And I think that what Elephant did here was very much taking advantage of that. Elephant made sure to always pull their cores out of the fights that were going badly for them to avoid falling behind versus IG's relatively greedy drafts. And then also, I think that IG had a little bit of an injection of cockiness because of their major win, or maybe they don't need to care as much. And they were volatile already. They dropped a lot of games last season. They struggled a lot, even though their overall record ended up being pretty nice. But they always, in my opinion, needed just that little push to shove them off balance. And I feel like that has definitely happened. Of course, IG, I think they do get at least one of the easier matchups still to come. Yeah, they still have SAG to go, which is SAG 0-7 right now. They aren't going to stand a chance. They haven't stood a chance against anyone so far.
Yeah, there's certainly SAG are struggling there, but we've still got IG next week have SAG, but then the week after they have, I believe, a stronger team. I can't remember exactly the result. So they do need to very much kick in. It's not looking likely that they're necessarily going to walk into the major, would you say?
Exactly. Because we're seeing them at the top of the standings here, right? But if you compare that, and I specifically wanted to bring that up, if you compare the standings to I-League, where a lot more rounds have been played, you can see the difference between Team Aster and Team Elephant, who are right now at the top of the round robin in the DPC. Neither of them have really been trying. Team Aster have even lost a series to Magma, who are right now middle of the pack in the second division in China. So that'll tell you how seriously they're taking it. But Aster is up there in the top 3, and Elephant is all the way down there at the bottom. It is definitely way more of a challenge for Elephant to stay at the top than it is for Aster to maintain this position.
Okay, going outside of, let's talk about the results this week for Aster. They beat Sparking Arrow Gaming. Did you manage to watch that game? Was it pretty much a stomp?
It was very much a stomp. There was absolutely nothing to be done there for SAG. And it feels like they have been crumbling. There's still some effort involved, but I don't think they really believe in saving themselves from degradation anymore.
Okay, fair enough. Not much to say about Sparkling Arrow Gaming other than we're sorry it's going so badly. And Aster, it seems to be going very well, but not much to learn there if they're playing one of the weakest teams. So let's go into the more meaty games in the middle of the pack. I guess, is there much to talk about from PSG LGD versus eHome?
Yeah, so PSG LGD versus eHome is the matchup actually that I spent a lot of time going into, because I was curious how eHome took this game off of LGD eHome. They're struggling with Sylar's hero pool so much. They finally have a proper carry right now, but Sylar, if you think about him, you think Luna, you think Lycan. We don't talk about Lycan right now. And Luna is not doing hot either. There's a lot of carries in the meta that will both like on equal farm outfight her, but they might also outfight her when she's one item ahead, which is where the Luna needs to be. And her timing window also ends pretty soon. So eHome has been struggling to find the right heroes for Sylar. They've had some mixed success with Ursa, for example. I've seen a Morphling game that ended pretty well. And altogether, LGD just look like they have way more tools in their arsenal. They have a lot more flexibility in their drafts. And I think that's what allowed them to, in the end, pass by eHome relatively easily.
It's a strong week for LGD. Obviously, the win against eHome and then another gimme win against Sparkling Arrow Gaming. But previously to this, they were obviously 2-1 because they're now 3-2 in the standings. Coming into this week, they would have been 2-1, 1-2. Sorry. Is this a turning point for them? Do you think, or was their previous results? Because but just because of the rough week the week before.
Yeah, I definitely think that that Vici surprised them a little bit the week beforehand. I'm trying to remember these matches, but I think, both of these matches are something that I've seen before, and it's happening to a lot of teams right now, actually. It's what I like to call the Snapfire debate. People are picking Snapfire and enjoying the huge amount of minus arm that you get from the little Shredder build. You get the Solar Crest as well, and then it's very tempting to say, all right, well, that deals a ton of damage. We're just going to pick synergies with that, because this hero is going to be our +4 or +5. She's going to be in all the fights. The problem is that all of the damage is single target, and if you pick synergies with that, you end up with a whole lot of single target physical damage, and you lose the mid-game fights to anyone who has AoE magical damage. Because the magic damage, even if it's less absolute numbers, is still going to come out ahead because you're applying it to a lot of different heroes at the same time.
Yeah.
So a lot of teams struggle with that. And in this series, LGD, 2 Snapfire picks combined with Pangolier, as well as a Faceless Void DK. There just wasn't much magic damage to be had at all, and it allowed VG Gaming to take over in the mid game.
Great. Okay, then let's close up on this week by talking, I suppose. We spoke a little bit about Elephant, but that Vici Elephant series, is this your bellwether for what's going to happen to Elephant in the next couple of weeks? Because Vici are also having not the best time they've ever had as a team at the moment.
Yeah, so Vici, like, I think I've said this before, but they're struggling with Erica still. But Erica is he's getting better with leaps and bounds. I'm really impressed by how much he's improved. And I think if they would have had him start at the start of next season and give him a full year to work towards an international, he would have been like an international worthy carry for sure.
Okay.
By now, he's still a bit green. This was not a long season. So they have that problem to solve. And then Elephant, honestly, anytime they feel like they're cool, they start dropping the ball. These are 2 very different teams with very different problems. And yeah, I see Vici's win here as definitely a win of stability over Elephant. And I think in the end it might be what puts them ahead, at least for me, over Elephant. I would personally be very surprised if Elephant make the major at all.
Okay, so it's a bold claim, but we'll see what happens. That ROTK position as coach it's been discussed a lot amongst a lot of people. It's one of the legendary coaches of the game. Do you see his influence in there at all, or do you think he's not being listened to? Is he not his former self?
Yeah, no, I think he's absolutely being listened to, and I saw a big difference immediately as soon as he was brought in. It's just that the problem is that he got brought in after the problem had already taken root. The team already had expectations that already had not been met, and now he is fighting against something that was in the team earlier than he was. He's gotten an overgrown garden, and he's pulling all the weeds out before he can actually start growing the plants, And I see a constant struggle against that. Like the first 15 minutes, they're going to play tight, and that, the memory of ROTK standing behind their chair slowly fades.
Fair enough.
And they get cocky again. And that's really the cycle. If Elephant can break that, then more power to them, and they can actually immediately become a contender because of the quality of players on their team. But this is a very insidious problem. And as someone who's had to work against it in the past, I'm not sure if I believe that even ROTK can do something against it at this short of a notice.
Great. Okay. But to close up, I want to go delve back into last week when obviously we didn't have an episode and talk a little about where Asta is. Obviously, we didn't have much of an Asta game this week, as we discussed earlier. But they won 3 series last week, all pretty convincingly. We don't have to go for each of those series in turn by any stretch of the imagination, but talk for me a little bit about what Asta are doing so well this DPC so far.
I think Aster, most of all, they are really on top of their drafting. They don't make a lot of mistakes. It's almost cookie cutter, you could say. I don't think they have been the most interesting team in the Chinese DPC by any stretch of the imagination, but even the previous time around as well. It's mostly Boboga making early game things happen, pulling out crazy picks, crazy moves, and the rest of it is they just move really well, they farm really well. I really liked Ame's activity as well. He's not just sitting back, but he's also coming forward with his team whenever it's necessary. What can I say about them? I'm saying Ame, Monet, excuse me. Still thinking about LGD. And then, yeah, the other standout again is White Album with a lot of, like, I thought that he would still suffer a little bit of the pop star mentality, like, the kind of overextensions that you may see from an emo, for example, but he has been way more stable than that. And I think that's really been the name of the game for Aster. They are very, very consistent.
Great. Good to see, and look forward to seeing them more next week. We've got a couple of Asta games coming up. On May the 11th, we've got Vici versus eHome, then Asta versus RNG. Then May the 14th, we've got Asta versus eHome, Vici versus RNG, and we're closing off on May the 16th with IG versus SAG, and PSGLG versus Elephant, which to me would be the standout series. But for you, are there any other particular highlights that people should look to?
No, that's definitely it. Like, if Elephant can get past PSG LGD, then everything I just said is out the window. Well, apart from the fact that RTK is a god, and Elephant's going to be at the major.
Great. Okay, lots to look forward to then. Thanks so much for joining me this week, and I'll speak to you next week. Thank you to Kips for taking us through China. Kips can, of course, be found on Twitter at KipSul and should be followed there. We, however, are going to be following our noses and moving on straight away to North America, where Neff is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to start, talk me through what I suppose you see as the top matches in this week in the NADPC.
All right. Top match, in my opinion, probably the Dog Champ Wind and Rain. Dog Champ finally lost a match to Wind and Rain, who previously had a pretty awful record, although that was in the lower division, so a lot of people aren't going to be that excited about that one. But upper division, pretty cut and dry week number 4. A lot of 2-0s. If I had to say my favorite upper division match, it'd probably be Quincy Crew. That's one of the ones that I expect to be a little bit more even, but very one-sided for Quincy Crew, actually.
Yeah, but let's go into that one there, because for Zoomers, we've spoken about them a lot, and they're a team, I think, with promise, and they have an interesting play style, but they've certainly struggled in this DPC. They're currently sitting just one spot away from relegation. They don't look particularly in threat of relegation, but they are at the bottom. Talk me through what ended up happening there. How were they taken apart by Quincy Crew?
I think a lot of it came down to game number 1. They really became in their heads after that one. They managed to first pick a Broodmother, send it to the offlane. It was Brax on that one, but it's a dominating performance from Quinn is all I can really attribute it to. Bristleback, insanely strong right now. Played that in the mid lane. Ended up grabbing an Arcane Rune at 6 minutes at top. And of course, Shadow Demon on the side of Quincy Crew had set up stacks inside the Radiant Triangle. Well, all those stacks went the way of Quinn after he managed to secure himself several kills. And off the back of that, it was just the Quinn show. All he got to do basically anything that game uncontested. It was absolutely insane how strong the Bristleback was, running at people without a care in the world.
How's Quinn been this so far in this DPC? Because I think Quinn's been one of the top mids in NA for a long time now. I think he necessarily didn't perform as expected at the major necessarily, but how's he been doing this time in the DPC? Has he recovered well?
It's hard to really get a gauge for how good Quinn is at this point. We talk about these top 3 teams in North America: Undying, Evil Geniuses, Quincy Crew, sitting head and shoulders above everybody else, and then you got Simply Two Base, Black and Yellow, 4 Zoomers beneath that, and of course Sad Boys in the cut very sad at the bottom. But until we can see games against Evil Geniuses, against Undying, it's hard to say just how good Quinn is. He does look very consistent so far. And if I was Evil Genius, I'd be a little bit afraid at the moment. We've got some interesting stuff coming up in week number 5. The most interesting thing of all is Evil Geniuses play against Undying on the 13th, and then they have to match against Quincy Crew on the 16th, which gives Quincy Crew a chance to kind of figure out what they have going on. And given their performance so far in Quincy Crew and how good Quinn looks at the moment, that's if you're an EG fan, you're sweating a little bit.
I think if EG win just one of those games, they're in good standing to get through. Because I think what's worth talking about at this point when discussing the NA DPC is we have 3 teams on, undefeated records. 5-0 for Undying and 4-0 for both EG and Quincy Crew. So if any one of those teams beats another one of those teams, then it's quite squeaky. There's not really a lot of room for error here.
Yeah. Or we could run the same issue that we ran in last season when one defeats the others in like a rock, paper, scissors scenario, and they're all tied for first place. But Evil Geniuses and Quincy Crew ended up making it through that one. But this time, I think EG, what they're aiming for is uncontested first, not dropping a single series or a single game if they can help it.
Let's talk about what EG did this week then, which was a 2-0 win against Simply Two Based, who were coming off a domineering 2-0 win against The Cut. How did EG look in that? Is it hard to tell against a team of Simply Two Based quality?
Simply Two Base, I got some friends on that team, so it's hard to talk about just how bad it was. It's a 5K net worth advantage at like 10 minutes in, dominate every single lane. Both games, 25 minutes, which is pretty short for this patch. Centaur picked up in both games as well. Absolute amazing performance by Ice. I will say there was maybe one moment of brilliance by Simply Two Based, but I think that was just EG feeling super overconfident. In game number 2, they saw a dive around the 9-minute mark of the very dire mid-1 tower, just right behind it. Every hero on their team. 4-man Chronosphere for the Faceless Void, followed by a 4-man Dreamcoil for the Puck. But even then, they didn't lose that much off of it. They still had a 5K net advantage at 10 minutes, despite doing that kind of dive. It was a slaughter. There's not much else to say about it. Simply Two Base, their heroes just came online a little bit too slow in game number 1 and game number 2. They just got run over by the massive amount of skill here on EG.
Fair enough then. Let's go into see if there's more to talk about in Undying versus Sad Boys. Undying are, of course, an incredibly impressive team. I want to focus a little bit more on why Sad Boys is such an unimpressive team, because looking at that roster, I think a lot of people, they'll be listed as Pentace in some areas, will think Theory, Aura, Monster, Z-Freak, Moo. That's a good old lineup. Why aren't they any good?
I think the reason they're not good is because Sad Boys are thinking the same thing as everybody else. They're kind of expecting to win off the raw amount of talent on their team, but I think all these other teams in the upper division are hungrier than them. Simply Two Base, Black and Yellow, Zoomers, they all feel like they have something to prove. These guys have also been around a little bit longer. You fundamentally changed your roster when you move Moo to the position 5. He's feeling like a foo. Moo to the position 5. You change your roster. You throw in Monster to the lineup. You toss in Z-Freak. You shake things up since season 1. It's got to. I mean, yeah, you have like a completely different team this time around. You need to change like your entire game plan. And I think that they're probably not putting as much time into scrimming and whatnot like they were when PPD and D&M were on the team. Because of that, they're kind of falling apart. I think that's one of the issues with having so much international talent on your team is you can kind of expect to win. I was kind of a naysayer for EG in season 1. We talked about that one a little bit. I wouldn't be as strong, and they'd end up getting stronger and stronger as they went on, which they have. I didn't think they'd get this strong though. I think Sad Boys is kind of running into that problem, though, where they've got a lot of talent here, but they haven't been together for long enough. And because of that, these other teams have an advantage over them.
Certainly makes sense to me. I want to then therefore go a little bit into Undying, who are currently topping the group, 5-0 by the virtue of having played one more game than EG and Quincy Crew. How do you feel about that team? We've spoken a lot of positives about them. What are they doing that sets them apart, that's different to what EG and Quincy Crew are doing?
They play fast, I would say. EG has kind of set to match that a little bit. They've had our tour on the Nature's Prophet, position 1, and they're playing a little bit fast with that, along with Ice Centaur. But Undying just played quicker Dota than everybody else. I'd say that, their mid laner a little bit more skilled than a lot of the other mids. He's one of the few people that can actually match up to Aubin and Quinn, I feel. There's just a massive skill difference in all these different players. Moon Meander, of course, and Dubu, amazing captains, I think. The voice and knowledge of the game, I think, is what separates them from a lot of these other people in the upper division. They did drop a series to Black and Yellow. That one was absolutely hilarious. We went over that a little while ago. But other than that, I'm not surprised that they're placed where they are. And I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to take a series off of EG or Quincy Crew. I'd give them maybe 30-70 odds against both those teams.
Let's have a word then again about Black and Yellow, who mentioned there. They took 2 games off the cut, who are currently winless in the upper division. Is there anything?
So are Sad Boys. So are Sad Boys. Sad Boys are also winless. Is there anything to learn about Black and Yellow? Not a whole lot. They took their match against the cut, which is kind of what everybody expected. I think Envy's been performing a little bit better than I thought. He'd stepped away and wasn't grinding Dota as much. He's playing a lot of teamfight tactics a couple of months back. Absolutely disgusting in my opinion, but you know how he gets when he's finally motivated to play the game, or non-stop games, non-stop scrims. He's been playing pubs basically all day. I am interested in their match against Four Zoomers in week number 6, because I think that Four Zoomers should win that. If Black and Yellow win, I think we might just finally see Four Zoomers shake their pretty stable roster up.
Yeah, certainly. Let's go into what's coming up next then in week 5. Jumping ahead to week 6 already. May 11th, we've got Sad Boys versus The Cut. In a match that will guarantee one of them a win.
Yes. Thank you very much. I was about to make that comment.
May the 13th, we've got the big boys of EG versus the gigantic men of Undying, and Sad Boys versus Quincy Crew. And on May the 16th, we've got Simply Two Base versus Four Zoomers, and then another big match in EG versus Quincy Crew. So not everything saved for the last week this time. We've got some big matches here. What would be your highlight?
I would say the most interesting match is EG versus Undying. I'm not sure who's going to win that one. I'm thinking that on the 16th, Quincy Crew might just beat Evil Geniuses. They can pick apart what EG is doing, and EG don't have multiple strats to run or prepare in those next couple of days that they have. EG comes into that one with a significant disadvantage because they have to play against one of their major opponents, and then the other major opponent gets to analyze that and then pick them apart the next time around. I would be pretty unhappy with that one myself. I'd play those 2 games back to back like that one, but I think these teams have intentionally put off their matches against each other until week number 6. So there's a different level of strategy to the DPC that you don't see in major tournaments, and I think that's really cool. But the most interesting day is probably May 16th. Simply Two Base against Four Zoomers and EG against Quincy Crew. Both those games are going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a one-sided slaughter in series number 2 on May 13th.
We've got a couple of moments at the end here to delve briefly into the lower division, where Division 2 Hustlers are currently sitting 6-0 with our good friend 1437 having a wonderful time, and Team Dogchamp 5-0. Are those teams just head and shoulders above the rest, or could Arkosh Gaming or Pentaco Squad Gaming possibly shift into the top 2 positions?
I think it's pretty unlikely at this point. Arkosh, they've got an easy road ahead of them, though. I imagine that they'll win their next 2 series. They have to play against Picado Squad, who lost their mid P1, who I'm not sure if you caught any of the interviews, the games that have been going on, regarded as the best lower division mid player. So they're going to be a lot weaker without him. I don't imagine they'll be able to take a game series or even a game off of Arkosh on May 11th when that one happens. And I think they'll have a pretty easy time beating 5-man Midas, who haven't had an amazing performance so far. So it's all up to DogChamp whether or not they can beat Arkosh here. If Arkosh end up closing out the series against DogChamp, they might be able to take their spot in the relegation. There's some hot-blooded history between these two, Lukey and Arkosh.
Yes, most certainly. It's going to be a dramatic end to the season, whatever it is. And exciting to see Division 2 Hustlers do so well with Theben not entirely sure what he's going to do if they get to the upper division, I believe. So
That's right. At that point, he's really got to make a choice, huh?
Yeah, do you the wealth of the upper division or a stable casting career? What do you choose? But there we go. He's probably the only caster in any of the DPC who is a player currently active, which is interesting to see. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining me this week, Neff, and I'll see you next week. Huge thanks to Neff for taking us through North America. He can be found on Twitter at NeffSensei and is covering a range of regions and a range of tournaments across the world. So should be followed to see what exactly is going on in Neff Town. He's been great to work with. We are going to be going on to our final region, which is 1437, taking us through South America. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what you see as the major highlights of last week.
Well, we got a lot of amazing games that happened in week 4, starting with No Ping versus Thunder Predator, which was a big game. People felt like No Ping were that team that's like kind of sitting in third, right after Thunder Predator and Beast Coast. But then some people also felt like maybe they could be potentially better. They could be the team that could go to the major. And in the series, like TP, they won game 1, but then they lost 2 following games and they got like really stomped, to be honest, in the following games. And I think No Ping now are sitting in a very good situation, especially considering TP lost against Beast Coast the week beforehand and now have 2 losses where No Ping don't have any. So that was like the first series that started off there.
So talk me through that loss, because you say that they Thunder Predator won game 1 fairly convincingly and then just got stomped. Was it just them dropping off, or what are making No Ping a top tier contender here?
I think they kind of changed their drafts up a little bit. In game 1, they had something that didn't have so much more team fight, and that kind of like made No Ping fall off. But then No Ping, like they adjusted their drafts in game 2, game 3. We saw Dark Mago playing something a bit more comfortable, and he had more impact, especially with his bristleback, which is kind of strong. And then they just kind of like built up from there. They had this second core. Pretty much where in game 1, they didn't have that second core that wasn't able to really control the game alongside HFN. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, TP, they just looked really shaky. Plus their drafts didn't pan out too well for them.
Is HFN really the key player for No Ping here? Is he?
Oh, definitely. Last season when they started No Ping, they didn't have HFN. They were like on a losing streak, and then mid season they bring in HFN and they just start winning all their games. They were the only team that also beat Beast Coast in the last season, and they kind of just like use that momentum into season 2, and they just keep going from there.
So let's mentioning Beast Coast. The only team that have beaten them this time is Infamous, who beat them 2-1 there with another big surprise this week. What ended up happening there?
That was right after the No Ping versus TP series, so there was already one upset, and then Infamous versus Beast Coast, same thing happened where Beast Coast, they take game 1. Game 2 was very close. I think it could have gone either ways, but Infamous, they had a few good moves here and there that allowed them to like get ahead, and then Beast Coast, like they just kept battling back. They play with Luna. We feel like Luna hasn't been this hero that has this high win rate and isn't really the best hero to be picked, especially for some of these South American teams. But the carry players keep preferring it, and I feel like Beast Coast, they just played from the back foot after the mid game. And Infamous, even though they struggled to close out the game in the end, they managed to do so. They pushed it to game 3, and game 3 they had this strategy where they would just play very aggressively and try to run at you all the time, where Beast Coast, they picked like this last pick Ricky, which was to try and counter out the Juggernaut in the lane where he can just blink back every time he spins. But then the Ricky didn't have a lot of impact in the mid and the late game, which kind of ruined Beast Coast's draft in my opinion, and thus allowing Infamous to, that was more of a convincing win. Like Beast Coast did not look like they really had any chances to beat Infamous in game number 3. So, and all of a sudden, Beast Coast just dropped one series, and No Pain versus Beast Coast is yet to be played. That's actually the last series of DPC Season 2 South America, and people are going to be looking forward to that because that will dictate whether Beast Coast will be first place or No Ping will be first place, going straight into the playoffs with the major.
It's going to be a big one. The way you spoke about that series, you kind of implied that the loss was Beast Coast's fault rather than Infamous's win. Would you say that?
I think Infamous played well, but Beast Coast draft didn't allow them to play at 100% of their capabilities. So we didn't really see all of Beast Coast in that series, especially game 2 as well. Like Luna being picked, I don't feel like K1 is good with the hero, but there's just so many other heroes that he's better with, and I feel like it would have allowed them to have a better chance of beating Infamous. Same thing with game 3 with the Ricky pick. I think it really butchered their draft.
The week before last as well, we saw Beast Coast drop their first game of this DPC so far to Thunder Predator.
Yeah.
Is there, because last time we saw them, I think, drop one game throughout the entire DPC. So now they're already in a much worse position than they were before. Are they a worse team now? Is it a sense of faltering? Is there anything going wrong with them?
I think there's something with the team, like some kind of friction because of one of the players getting sick or couldn't go to the major, right? So there's obviously going to be some kind of animosity there. Even if someone will say there isn't. I heard there were rumors of players being possibly replaced or something like that. Before season 2 started, they stuck around obviously, so maybe they're not all there like mentally right now because they couldn't go to the major and perform, especially watching Thunder Predator, the team that was second, getting 6th place at the major must have been
rough,
really hard on them for Beast Coast, like thinking like, oh, what could we have accomplished had we gone there? Plus it's your TI dreams on the line as well. On top of that, I think the general skill and macro level of the teams playing in Division 1 has elevated quite a bit because of like in Division 1, like because of Season 1, right? You got all this practice with all these good teams, plus during the downtime before Season 2, these teams are practicing with other teams or with North American teams. They're getting more of that in, and I think that's why Beast Coast and Thunder Predator are having a tougher time right now, is because these teams are taking things more seriously. And I feel like DPC is developing into something like whatever was envisioned of it and having something more competitive. So I think this is just really good for the scene that Beast Coast is losing games.
It's interesting to hear. Let's go into the final game of the week on May 8th, Infamous versus No Ping. There's another No Ping win. Is that just a continuation of No Ping's strong ability or Infamous?
It was not even close. It was just like absolute beat down both games. No Ping even had a carry Templar Assassin on HFN. Yeah, he's like kind of reinventing how Templar Assassin can be played, which was very interesting. If you guys want to check out that game, it's amazing. He plays it a lot like a Medusa and a Luna, just plays for farm. Doesn't buy Blink Dagger, just goes like the damage items, Desolator, Pike, and BKB, Dataless. So whatever allows him to just stand his ground behind his team. His team stuns someone, he just goes in, does the damage, and he is an incredibly fast farming hero because of the side blades. And that's what he's doing to like pretty much make the hero work, especially if he can't get that Medusa and Luna for himself. Very impressive games, and No Ping, like they're looking like they're going to be number 1. I mean, the Beast Coast game is very important because Beast Coast has only lost 1 series, and if they could beat out No Ping, then they got the tiebreaker advantage there too. But it's going to be a very, very interesting series on week 6.
Let's focus a little bit then on those middle table teams or bottom table teams, Infinity, Unknown, Core NSG. Anything interesting to report from those games on May the 7th?
Not really. I feel like the story is all around No Ping, Beast Coast, Thunder Predator, and Infamous. And the biggest story is Thunder Predator probably not being able to go to the major. It feels like Beast Coast and No Ping are legit locked in, especially if Beast Coast doesn't drop a series to SG. Because No Ping is looking like they're gonna at most have 1 loss against Beast Coast, if ever. And then Beast Coast, like they have to lose against SG for Thunder Predator to even have a shot. in any way. So and even then, the head-to-head, like Thunder Predator is not going to come on ahead Beast Coast. So there's a big problem there that TP, the team that got 6, won't be going to a major. Other than that, like Hakori, SG, Unknown, Infinity, these guys are all about the same place. There's a little bit of drama with SG and their previous position 3 player who was kicked, King RD. Sure heard of him, and he wrote some stuff on Twitter after SG's recent losses because it's very disappointing for all the Brazilian fans what happened to this team, especially since in season 1 people thought they were like the 3rd best team, and now they're sitting in a position where they could just be eliminated from Division 1. So if you guys want to check that out, you can go to the Twitter of King RD and get your Google Translate on.
Great. Let's look ahead to what's happening next week then. As you said, a big week, but probably the biggest week is the one after this. On May the 12th, we've got Unknown versus No Ping, Kora versus Thunder Predator, Infamous versus Infinity, and Beast Coast versus SG on the 14th, then closing off with Thunder Predator versus Infinity on the 15th. Are there any particular highlights in there? Because for me, this looks like a week in which the big teams just need to do their business.
Exactly. The big teams just got to show up. They got to play their game, settle the grid. And I think that's what's going to happen. The only upsets I could possibly see would be Infinity versus Infamous, because Infamous, they could be shaky sometimes. Infinity, they have been feeling a little bit better as the tournament has been progressing, but it's really tough for them. They got like 1 series win right now. I do think they have like the players to be able to take games off. So maybe if there was a game that could be potentially going the other way is Infinity versus Infamous. Other than that, like I said, the big teams, they just got to take care of business.
Great. We'll look forward to that then. Let's delve briefly into the lower division. I know you've been covering it extensively. Are there any exciting teams coming up through these ranks?
Mainly just Binamistas. They look really good. They were also the team that could have potentially been in Division 1 last season. They had to play through the tiebreakers. They couldn't make it. But other than that, we got Ego Boys are doing well. Like, everyone is just so tight in Division 2. If you check out the brackets right now, you got Binamistas at top, but everybody else has like 9 or 6 points. They're like kind of just locked in there. We might have to have a lot of tiebreakers at the end of this season for Division 2, because the tier 2 teams have just been very hit or miss depending on the day that they show up. Some of these guys, they can tilt really hard, so whoever takes the first game of the series sometimes just pretty much dominates game number 2, and on the next day, like if the same teams would play against each other, it could be the other team winning. So it's really hard to predict, especially who is going to come out ahead. A lot of these games are 50-50. Even the team Inverse, who are 3-2 now, last season they were actually supposed to be eliminated, but because one of the teams did some shady business and they got removed, Inverse was allowed to stay in Division 2. And now if you look at them, they're sitting in 3rd place at the end of week 4, which is like none of us would have believed that.
Certainly. Okay, well, lots to look forward to in the upcoming weeks. Thanks so much for joining me this week, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Huge thanks to 1437 for taking us through South America. You can, of course, be followed on Twitter at 1437x. And he's fantastic, and incredible congratulations for how well he's doing in the lower division of North America. He's doing fantastically there. Thanks to all of my panelists, Peksu, Mo Farah, Danog, Kips, Neff, and 1437, who have been all fantastic to work with this week. And thank you for listening. Again, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Daniel Offen, and that's spelled Daniel, then OFFEN. And you should follow me there for updates on all of my podcasts and weird jokes that I occasionally make. Next, you might want to financially support me via my Patreon. They're always very much appreciated. You don't get very much, but you get to make me happy, which is reward enough. So thanks to everyone who supports me via Patreon. Next week, I'll be back with another DPC show. I'm hoping for another Position 6 this week. I'm not exactly sure who it's going to be, but we'll find out soon enough. So thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you and see you soon.